Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of The Other Side of Addiction. I am your host, Al Richards. Guys, all the guests that come on The Other Side of Addiction, we hear people share their stories. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about the power of storytelling. Now, there's actually a menu. I don't know a menu, maybe some instructions. I don't even know if that's the right word, but our guest today is really going to help us with that. So just so you guys know a little bit, as much as the world has changed and continues to change, one aspect remains the same: the power of storytelling. Human beings have been telling stories since they could first speak. Our earliest ancestors used narrative to pass on their stories or their histories, their morals, their ethics, their life lessons. From those earliest days around the fire to today's access to books, movies, TikTok videos, storytelling remains one of the most impactful communication skills or tools. The ability to master these skills boils down to a few key elements. In this interview today, you'll pick up the foundational concepts of the memorable stories, the 5 necessary elements to a meaningful story, and how to create an authentic delivery, which delivery, in my eyes, is extremely important. And that is one thing I actually want to get better at when I get up and do my public speaking. So our guest today is Michael Davis. He is the founder of Speaking CPR. He is the author of the book on storytelling and the soon to be released Your Story Suck. I really like that title, Michael. How to fix them and increase your impact. He's also a trainer and professional speaker. You'll leave today's interview with a deeper understanding of why your stories can have a lasting impact on others. And guys, you've heard me say this on the show quite a bit, because when people are using their voice, it is flippin' powerful. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our guest today, Michael Davis. Michael, thank you for joining us today.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm thrilled to be with you today.
Absolutely. You're looking all debonair this morning. I guess it is still morning where you're at. You're 2 hours ahead.
It is early afternoon.
Early afternoon. All right.
Yes,
All right.
the weekend has started.
I love it. I love it. I have a question for you right off the bat.
Sure.
What had you come up with Speaking CPR? Because you've got the EKG thing. So I'm assuming that's what it's is it about, like the heartbeat? Or share a little bit more about that, if you would, please.
The origin of that, Al, is pretty simple. It is that most speeches and stories are on life support or near death. My job is to help bring them back to life. Now, I was born an MD, Michael Davis. I'm not an MD. I'm not going through 16 years of schooling. I just did it easier. I was born with the initials MD. Made it very easy for me.
Yeah.
But early in my career, when I was starting this business, we played around with the idea of the Speaking MD and all that. And somebody said, you bring stories to life. And I thought, CPR. It was that simple, sitting around a lunch table one day with some friends.
That is a really cool story. And yeah, how would you have known that your initials just kind of worked out that way, right?
Exactly.
It's kind of, Michael, how the initials AR, you see in the background, AR, the other side of addiction. I've done many, many years of networking. Everyone knows me as Al Richards. So I'm like, okay, I want AR for Al Richards, right? Al Richards,
Right.
the other side of addiction. One of my buddies about a year ago, who was a guest co-host on the show, said, AR, does that stand for addiction recovery? I went, oh my heck, I never thought of it that way.
We need other people to see our story and our life to give us those insights.
Yeah. And when you and I spoke a couple of weeks ago, I wanted you on the show really because a lot of the guests that come on our show, they come on for the very first time, right? We've had over a half a dozen people share their story about their addiction. They've been very vulnerable for the very first time. And I remember when I sat down having coffee with a friend, and I first started opening up about my wife's battle with alcoholism. And the first thing that came out of his mouth, he goes, Al, you need to share this. And I said, who would want to hear this? And he goes, who wouldn't? because there are other people out there going through the same thing. That didn't dawn on me, right? When we have problems in our life, we think we are the only ones that's going through what we're going through.
Mhm.
I love your whole concept, Michael, because again, you're helping people use their voice and share a story, which in my eyes, after doing this for now 2.5 years, these stories are extremely powerful, which I read during, right at the beginning of the show.
Mhm.
So thank you for doing what you're doing.
Oh, I appreciate that. I appreciate the acknowledgement. I feel like I was born to do it. It took me a long time to get here to help people with their stories. I had to go through my own fears and lack of self-esteem and self-image, all that ties in. I haven't directly dealt with an addiction, although I believe we all have our own kinds in various ways, but I am the grandson of a seriously alcoholic. And my mother she wasn't much of a drinker. I haven't really been much of one either. But I do believe, because I have a very close friend who's been in AA for 40 years, and I've gone to meetings with him because I wanted to understand him better. And the stories that I picked up, there's so many similarities between people who go through addictions and battle with them every day. And the message I try to get to everyone, whether you have an addiction or not, you have a journey that's worth sharing with others. The problem that you and I have out, and if you're watching this, you have the same problem. We all do. We can't see the power of our story. We lived it. We've survived it. So we think, no big deal. It is a big deal to others who are going through the same journey. The early part of the journey you've gone through, and they don't know that they can make it. As you've said, they don't feel like anybody understands them. They're all alone. And if nothing else, our story is valuable to let others know, hey, I know what you're feeling and you can get through it.
Yeah. Who else better to help you with what you're going through than someone who's gone through it, right?
Mhm.
That's like me for 8 years being my wife's therapist through her alcoholism.
Mhm.
I didn't know anything about alcoholism, yet I was doing my best to be her therapist. And I even remember the day she told me once, she goes, I wish for once you'd be my husband instead of my therapist, because you don't have a clue what you're going through. So with what you're doing and allowing people to come on and share their stories and get whatever it is that they need to get out, I could almost guarantee there's someone out there that will relate to it and go, oh my gosh, I really needed to hear this today.
Oh, absolutely. Now, Al, if you don't mind, that moment you just shared, all memorable stories have two key moments. One is a low point moment and one is a high point moment. What you just described is that moment where your wife says to you, I wish you were my husband. What happened internally with you? What feelings did that bring up?
A couple feelings. First, my gut felt like it hit my feet. Secondly, my ego kicked in, right? And I'm just being honest, my ego kicked in and just said, oh, bull crap. I know what I'm talking about. And it took a little bit of a time frame to go through before I realized I had no clue and how long I've been doing things wrong, because again, I didn't know, right? It just, gosh, I don't even know the words for it. Even really not understanding. In all honesty, and I hope I'm answering your question. These are the feelings that have been
Well,
coming up through this, right?
this is what we do we help people with their stories. We call that the surface level event, but what was under that? She says to you, I wish you could be my husband. You immediately, your stomach drops, ego kicks in. Are you the only person that's ever happened to?
Oh, heck no.
No.
At that
I'll bet
time I
you,
did.
yeah, you felt that way,
Yeah.
but I'll bet you Al-Anon is full of people like that. Now, Do you think they could use your story to think,
Absolutely.
"Oh, that's what it is?" One of the big challenges I see, because storytelling is so popular today, we see people run through their stories so fast. They give a lot of details. It's like a report, but they're missing the emotional connection at a deeper level. When you stop and say, the moment she said that, I felt like my stomach fell to the floor. But then my ego kicked in. And I thought, oh no, she's wrong. You just look at your audience and say, you ever felt like that before?
Yeah.
And they're doing, uh-huh. And what they're saying subconsciously is, you get me, you understand me. Those
So
are powerful moments in stories.
no, and you're right. And it's almost, and correct me if I'm wrong, Michael, because you're the professional here on this. It's like being a comedian, right? The really good comedians know how to say it, how to throw the emotions in there, right? How to throw a personality in there, facial expressions, actions. That's what creates it, right? That's where we as an audience go, oh my gosh, I get it. It's the same way with storytelling, right? When you've got the emotions behind it. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is, one, because of what you just said. Secondly, when I did my very first speaking gig about my wife's addiction and what I was going through, I got very, very emotional, and I still get emotional. Through all my speaking gigs, no matter if I'm at a recovery center, I'm in front of 100 and something people, I always get emotional, right? The tears start flowing. I start getting choked up. And I remember going up to someone who came, well, someone came up to me after and they said, oh my gosh, Al, that was flipping amazing. And I said, I apologize for getting so emotional. And they're like, don't you dare apologize, because when you did that, that frickin' just sucked me right in with what you were going through. And they got emotional because of it.
It's an important point you bring up. There's a phrase that we use in the training world, and that is, do not use the stage for therapy. What that means is, it is great when you get emotional, by the way. It is important to be authentic and genuine and let the emotions flow. However, if the emotions are so strong that you can't get through it, you can't finish the talk, you can't get through sentences, it's too soon. You need to deal with a little bit of time. You never want to get to the point where you become a robotic about it. That's not good either, because people
Right.
aren't going to buy into it. So there is a fine line. One of my friends, his wife is a pastor, and I'm paraphrasing what she says. This sums it up perfectly, though. Use the stage or the camera to share your scars, but not your open wounds.
I love that.
The scar is where you've gotten some time, you've gotten some perspective, you've learned to manage the emotions, not control them and bury them. The open wound is too fresh. And typically, look, somebody who's freshly in recovery, I would say hold off for a while. Now, it's different when you're in, for example, a 12-step meeting and you're sharing, because you need that. You need that support of that group immediately that gets you. And if it means just getting it out of your system, do that. If you're asked to speak outside of an addiction or recovery group, make sure that it's not controlling your emotions so much that you can't get through and it just becomes about you. Because ultimately, the reason we share our stories or any speech, you got to give value to the audience.
Yeah.
Hope that
That's
helps.
that helps a lot. Yeah, that helps a lot. And it does make me feel good, right? Because I can get through it. It's just those tears while I'm saying it, right? So I'm glad that you brought that up, because that definitely can. I've seen that happen with others before, to where they have shared too soon and they're not able to finish. They just have to say, excuse me, but then and they have to leave, right?
Yeah. Now, on the opposite end of that, have you ever seen a speaker who cries the exact same way, the exact same part every time? That's contrived. I've seen speakers who do it.
Really?
Yeah, they're professionals, and you can tell it's like, there's no way you're feeling the exact same emotion the exact same way every time. If you get tears, they should come a little earlier, a little later the next time you tell it. Maybe a little more intensely, maybe a little less. But it
So,
should not be the exact same reaction every time you tell it.
so even though, I mean, can you tell by their facial expressions? Because I know okay, not every time. I know the majority of the time when I start feeling the emotions, I literally start feeling it coming up from my gut all the way into my heart. And then it's just like, boom, it happens. I mean, I can honestly start feeling it getting to that point. Can you see that in people's facial expressions, or those that are that well trained and that good that they can still put on those emotions at the same time?
I've been in a group of professional speakers. We were watching another one and some of us could tell, like, I'm not buying it. It feels contrived.
Wow.
Look, I think we need to trust our guts more. And when something tells you, that feels like BS to me,
Yeah.
don't automatically assume it, but start questioning. And you can tell. I believe today's consumer, for lack of a better term, watching videos, watching speakers, they're very sophisticated. We can smell it a
Yeah.
lot better than we used to. It's like, really? I think you're acting a little bit too strongly, or it just feels like an act. We get it. And the person who came up to you the first time it happened to you felt the authenticity that you were being genuine, and it truly was an emotional reaction. There's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with that at all. That humanizes you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's something I think a lot of us are afraid of too, though, right? Is showing our emotions, and the fear of being judged. And I really disagree with that. I think we all need to show our emotions. God gave us all these emotions for a reason. Right? Now, the trick is not to stay stuck there, right? It's okay
Right.
to be depressed one day. It's okay to be mad. It's okay to be frustrated. However, we just don't want to get stuck there, because that's when it takes us in a whole different realm. So I am a firm believer that we need to allow our emotions, and who gives a BS, what other people are thinking? Because again, it's us. We got to let it out.
Well, agreed. We have to be emotional, and that's a very vague term, by the way, because one person's emotion is another person's being passive or another person's being over the top.
Yeah.
I've seen speakers who've talked about, yeah, well, my little girl died when she was 2, and he talked like this, and I thought, really? You're pretty inhuman. I don't mean he needs to break down because he may have had enough time pass, but I want to see some emotion to talk about something that, I mean, I'm not
Yeah.
exaggerating. That is an example of somebody I've seen. And I thought, boy, something not right here. So, yes, we have to be emotional, but there's a range within which we should stay. And if we're outside that range, it's too soon, or it's possible to emotionally disconnect from your story because it's so far in the past that you no longer get the same message or the same impact from it. And that's okay. Put that story, at least put it on a shelf, if not retire it, because we have plenty of other stories to share.
Yeah. So to go in with what we spoke about here at the beginning of the show, and again, the reason why I wanted to have you on, because I know I've had some guests who really want to start sharing their stories, right? And they just don't quite know, and they're ready. They've given themselves enough time in their recovery journey to go, okay, I'm ready. I want to change someone's life. And it's crazy, because I get the same thing almost every time. And I've said this: if I can change one person's life, everything I've gone through has been worth it, right? Because we all know it's going to snowball. It
Right.
will definitely snowball. So what are some of the foundational concepts that you can help people who are looking at doing that? And also, I think we said the 5 elements, the 5
5 key
necessary
elements.
elements,
Yeah.
the 5 key
Yeah.
elements. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Well, you started with the correct word is foundation,
Okay.
meaning what is the foundational concept? What that means is, why are you telling this story? And not because I need to get my story out. Think about today's audience. They're distracted, they're busy, and they don't have much of an attention span. So if you're sitting there sharing a story or a message because it makes you feel good, they're going to tune out. they've got to know right away what's in it for me. One of my friends, world-class speaker, says, here's what audiences are really thinking. So what? Who cares? What's in it for me? We have to think like audience members as we're putting our stories together. So immediately we've got to give them some context. But the question you ask yourself as you're creating your story is, what do I want them to walk away with? What is the one message that a month, 6 months, 6 years from now, when they're in this similar situation, if they can remember my message, it can help them overcome the problem. I talk about storytelling. When I'm talking to a group of salespeople, my message is you can sell more with a story. Pretty simple. Sell more with a story. They'll remember the why. Think about some of the most effective advertising campaigns of all time. A diamond is forever. De Beers. Just do it. Nike. For those of us old enough to remember, where's the beef?
Yeah, right. Wendy's.
Was Wendy's way of saying all of our competitors are giving you a bunch of bread. That's really what they were saying, but it works. What is your version of where's the beef that they will remember? Always start with that. And then every element that goes into your story has to support that end result. That's what you want them to remember. Now, as far as the 5 key elements, the 5 are, you have to have a relatable character. That's number 1, who is going through relatable circumstances. Number 2, and those circumstances include an inciting incident, something which pushes that main character out of his or her comfort zone. Because people do not change or try to change their lives until they feel discomfort. I mean, we're talking about addiction here. Look, I'm not a psychologist. I am an MD, but I'm not a doctor. I have to believe through a lot of the research I've done that people feel comfortable within their addiction for a reason. And until they have that day where they're like, I'm no longer comfortable living with this addiction, I need to make a change. That's the inciting incident. Whatever it could be, a phone call, it could be a letter, it could be threatened going to jail, whatever it is, that forces them to start looking to make a change. So we've got a character in relatable circumstances who's now been pushed out of their comfort zone, and they start to look for that change, and that creates conflict. Conflict is the 3rd element. And without conflict, there is no story, because otherwise it's just it's a report. Conflict is often misunderstood, Al, because people think it has to be like a physical confrontation. Conflict has all forms, or it comes in all forms. It could be person versus society, person versus an organization like the government, or maybe they're in trouble with the law. Could be person versus nature. You know, so for several years, we've seen these movies about hurricanes and tornadoes and people trying to survive those. But the greatest conflict there is the internal conflict.
Yeah.
Person versus him or herself. Are you familiar with the concept of the hero's journey?
No, I don't believe so.
Okay, the hero's journey was a concept that was brought to the public back in the middle of the 20th century by a man named Joseph Campbell. He was a mythologist, and he studied thousands of years of mythology and storytelling, and he created this concept of the hero's journey. It actually has 19 steps, which is too many to remember, but he's a brilliant man. And one of the ideas he talked about was through history of our stories and our mythologies, the hero's journey is a person who goes on a quest to, I've mentioned that they've been pushed out of their comfort zone and they want to solve this problem so they can get back to a comfortable life, to feel better about life. He talks about dragons in mythology, that the hero faces dragons and that they have to get past this dragon to survive. Well, from a psychological standpoint, the dragon is the voice in our heads. The one that says, you can't do this. You're not good enough. You're a loser. I mean, all those negative, and I've talked plenty of folks who have dealt with addiction. Those are the kinds of things they're constantly listening to.
Yeah.
And we have to tame the dragon. And that's part of this conflict in the story. is dealing with those internal demons. And the way we typically do that is we need help from an outside source, someone we call the guide, who provides the wisdom, the new way, the new insight. In 12-step circles, it is the 12-step program. Follow these 12 steps and you can learn to manage your addiction. So that's the third element, dealing with the conflict, which also introduces the guide.
Okay.
Now, the fourth step is what we call the moment of success. This is when the main character realizes, I've handled that obstacle. My life is now better and I've overcome that initial problem. Typically, it happens in a quick moment. So let's go back to your story for a moment. What's your wife's name?
Janan.
Janan. When Janan said to you, I want my husband and I don't want a therapist. Okay. When did you have a moment when you realized I was just her husband? I wasn't being her therapist.
Oh, probably a couple of years after.
Okay.
It took me that long to figure it out, right? Because I was still stuck in the addiction.
Can you think of a time where maybe she said it to you or you realized, hey, I was just being her husband right there?
Well, yeah, the first time she said that to me. Am I making sense? So I went and picked her up. She had a 24-hour stay after, because she was in recovery, right? And she had a 24-hour stay, and I went and picked her up. And she was telling me some stuff that had gone on there at the recovery center. And me jumping right in to give her my 2 cents. I thought I was being her husband, right? I really did. I'm just like, okay, well, I'm going to help her out, right? I'm going to help her understand this. However, I didn't realize how much of that I was doing instead of just being her husband and sitting listening to her. I was always giving her the advice. And the word that I do not like to use anymore in my vocabulary, I was shoulding all over her. Is basically.
Oh, I agree. I hate that word.
Right?
It's the worst word in the English
Yeah.
language. Should.
Yep. Right. So basically that's what I did. I should all over her. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's where you were. Have you had a moment since when you could sit back and say, I was just being her husband, or she said that to you and I wasn't trying to be her there. I didn't should all over her.
Yes.
Okay. Do you have one how do I want to ask this? Do you remember the first time it happened?
Yeah. As a matter of fact, I do. It was probably a year and a half ago.
Okay.
And she started
Tell us
talking
more.
to me about some stuff, she's been in her recovery, right?
Uh-huh.
And I went to shit on her and I stopped myself and I sat and listened. And again, I hope I'm understanding. I hope I'm answering your question.
No, you keep going. This is it. This is the moment.
I let her finish. And I said, you know what? Thank you for sharing that with me. I don't know if you just wanted me to listen. I don't know if you're asking for advice. And she goes, well, I would like your opinion. And I told her, I says, I'm the wrong person to give you that opinion. This is something that you need to go talk to so-and-so or so-and-so because they understand what you're feeling right now. I can't give you an opinion on something that I'm not understanding.
Let's stay in that moment for a moment.
Okay.
The best stories are about transformation. That was the moment you transformed back to her husband and not her therapist.
Yes.
You changed. This is your story about how I was this way and I wasn't being as effective a partner, spouse as I could be. We went through this journey together. It wasn't always easy. But then came the day we sat down and I said to her, she said, thank you for listening. And you said, I'm not the person. What a change. And that's, again, spouses, partners of people who are suffering from addiction need to hear that moment because it gives them the hope. Because all stories are about hope that, yes, I can get through this too. That's the moment where they realize, oh, if he did it, maybe I can too.
It's a lot of sense.
That's the
Yeah.
fourth part of the story, the moment of success. Now, we can't stop it there, because if you don't tell us afterwards how you are, we could think, well, he just had that one moment, but then he slipped back into the shooting days. He started shooting all over again.
Right.
So we need to see very briefly that since that day, sure, I've had my moments where the shoulds want to come out, but I hold them at bay. I let them run their course, and I say to her, here's my, since you ask, here's my opinion, or I'm not the right person. But now it's a new habit. It's a new way of living. So we need to see that fifth part, which is the new life that shows the transformation has stuck.
Yeah.
If you put those 5 elements in, go back to your favorite books, movies, even TikTok videos. Some of them show this, these 5 beats. If they're in there and effectively put together and delivered, your story will stick.
Wow. And that's what you help teach people, correct?
Yes.
And then do you allow them, once they learn these skills, Michael, is that when you allow them to even come on and tell their story?
Well, when you say allow, help me understand what you mean.
Well, I'm just saying, do you have a platform? So let's say you and I have been working together for the last 3 months, okay? And I have finally got these 5 key elements right in place to help me share a more powerful story.
Mhm.
Now, do you give me a platform to share that story? Or is that just basically for me to grab and to hold, and then for me to go out and look for places to share it?
It's more of the latter, although a friend of mine the other days has me starting to think about my own podcast. So keep your
Okay.
ears open for that. But I tell you where I pick people to start is to go to Toastmasters
Yeah,
to share your story. Go to groups who have people that ultimately you want to help, that will let you come in and speak for free at first, because you don't want to, I shouldn't say speak for free. Never speak for free. Waive your fee. Because I want ultimately help people get professionally, get paid to be professional speakers. And that doesn't mean you have to give keynotes. There are speaking opportunities all over this world, virtually and in person. And ultimately, you should be compensated for that. Even if you take the money and donate it to your favorite cause, I don't care. There needs to be an exchange of value, because you are providing so much wisdom to people in the audience. But with that said, you want to get practice time.
yes.
You want to get in front of groups and work at Toastmasters is a terrific place. Maybe you're telling your story in a 12-step meeting. Find those places with the audience who will give you constructive feedback. But you don't have to wait until it's done. That's the beauty of this organization called Toastmasters. You go in there and you work on your story, get feedback, and make it better. So one of the challenges that I see is people will come to me and say, well, I want you to help me with my story, but I got to wait till it's perfect.
Yeah.
No, never. First of all, there's no such thing as a perfect story. And if there was, believe me, I know they don't work, because the first 7 years of my speaking career, I was insecure and I felt like everything had to be perfect. Hair, suit, everything. And I loved it, Al, when people said to me, Michael, you are so polished. You're such a polished speaker. And I thought, yeah, I know. And then one day I'm in my office, got a can of Pledge furniture polish, and I'm dusting off my desk. And I look at the can and I think, nothing sticks to polish. My message wasn't sticking. I was polished. People remembered, hey, that was a nice suit you had on. That's not why I'm speaking. So the day I was able to start to let go of that, and that took a while, right? You don't just let go of low self-esteem overnight. It takes some work. Once I realized that I was there to give a message, I started opening up and sharing a little bit more of myself, my failures, my flaws, my frustrations. And that's when I started to connect with audiences and have an impact. So this doesn't happen overnight.
Right.
And safe audience that's going to support you and give you constructive feedback, like a Toastmasters, even a 12-step group, is a place to go and start to share those painful parts of your story.
I love that you shared that. I mean, it seems like so far this whole show, it's like things are being put in place, which it's not. None of this has been script, right?
No.
Plus, with my brain, I wouldn't be able to remember it anyway. I'd have a
That's
hell
right.
of a lot of notes right here. First of all, for those that don't know what Toastmasters is, Toastmaster is an organization that you can go to. It's like a national speakers association, just a lot less money, really. And they really help you to where if you listen to people who are professional speakers, you don't hear a lot of the ums, the so's. They learn how to speak without those fill-in words. And they really help you, right? They really help you because I've gone to Toastmasters and it really opened my eyes on a lot of things that I was doing wrong. Or let's just say not wrong. I was doing the best that I knew how. It was just stuff that I did not know, right? Because there's a way. I've done commercials before, and for those who don't know about commercials, they teach you how to stand, how to hold your hands. There's an art behind it, right? And it's the same with speaking. Another thing that you said earlier, you don't have to wait. When I first decided to start speaking, I was invited to a Chamber of Commerce luncheon to come in and speak for 20 minutes. And I spoke about my journey with my wife's addiction. Now, basically, in all honesty, I was sharing my wife's story, not mine.
Mhm.
And I'll come to this here shortly. I shared her story. So, however, after 2020 and everything's kind of started opening back up again, I go out and I speak to recovery centers. I've spoke to, I don't even know how many recovery centers now. So I am now speaking in front of people who are in recovery. They understand my story. They understand things that I've gone through. However, a lot of them have not heard what the family member goes through, right? So that's a plus. I'm learning on the way. Now, no, I don't ask for any kind of money from recovery centers. I'm there for a reason, and that's to get a story out and hoping someone will feel it right here and open their eyes and go, oh my gosh, I really need to work hard at this, right? Because I don't want to put my family through that.
Mhm.
Michael, something that you shared about being authentic. I have a way of saying certain words. My English is not all the best, okay? I have changed some of my wording so I can look a little more professional. However, I'm me. I
Mhm.
don't get up on stage with the fancy suit. I love wearing my cowboy boots. I usually have my snakeskin boots. I'll either have a t-shirt on, I'll have a dress shirt that's untucked. I'll wear my pants that, kind of holy pants are like the thing. And I'm me. So when I get up on stage, I'm me. I'm Al Richards. I'm not there to be a
Right.
Tony Robbins, a Les Brown, a Brene Brown. I'm Al Richards. A good friend of mine, Dave DeRocher, who is the executive director of the Other Side Academy, downtown Salt Lake. He tells a phenomenal story. He's a great speaker. He tried suicide by cop, ran his car through a police barricade, drug dealer, prison since age of 13 all the way up into his adulthood. Now he's an executive director of probably one of the best recovery centers here in Salt Lake City, all of Utah, basically, as far as I'm concerned. I got to share stage with him last August. I spoke after he spoke. And I kept thinking to myself, my gosh, I scanned the audience. I could see their reaction. However, I watched the audience when he spoke. I did not get that same reaction. I want to be like him. I want to tell my story like him. So after our event, I came up to him and I said, Dave, when we all get back to Salt Lake City, because we held it in St. George, which is about 350 miles south of Salt Lake City, I said, I'd love to sit down with you and pick your brain. Well, it didn't happen till January of this year because we're all so busy.
Mhm.
And I went into his office. He came in and he goes, what did you want to speak to me about? And I says, I want to pick your brain about being a powerful speaker like you. I want to grab the audience like you grab the audience, right? And I'd love some advice. And he goes, may I speak freely? I said, yes, you may. And he was on a chair that had rollers. And he grabbed my knee and pulled himself right up to me like this. And he goes, you start telling your effing story instead of your wife's effing story. Then you will be a powerful speaker. And I just went, oh my hell. But he was right. And as soon as I started opening up and sharing my story of my weekend alcohol and cocaine use, a whole new person came out in me. A whole new speaker came out in me, to where now when I go speak, I do have people coming up to me going, that was freaking powerful. Thank you. You really touched my heart, or you really opened my eyes. That to me means so much, because that's telling me what little bit I know, and I'm still learning, and I still have a lot to learn. Just that little teeny bit of advice touched someone's life.
Oh yeah, him getting up in your face, which he sensed you needed. And he's
Yes.
right. This is a big issue we deal with a lot of folks. They come in, and there's some bad advice out there. I've heard people say, well, somebody told me I shouldn't tell my story. Okay, so you're going to share your wisdom, but you're not going to tell us a story on how you picked it up. Now, I think what people intend to say when they say don't share your story, that's not what they mean. What they mean is don't tell this kind of story. Yeah, I haven't always been this successful. There was a time when I was really struggling. But then one day I woke up and I had this answer, I had this thought. And I started taking new action. 6 months later, I was out of debt. I had 6-figure debt. I was broke every way. But now, 6 months later, I've got money coming in, got a beautiful wife. Today, we've got 3 gorgeous kids, 2 dogs, houses on. That's not what people want to hear. Okay. The story of how great I am. No, that's what people mean when they say, don't tell your story. We all want to know, can you help me get past this problem I'm having, Mr. or Mrs. Speaker? And if they tell us their low point, we mentioned before, in that conflict step, the third step is a low point moment when the guru comes in, or the guide who gives you the wisdom and says, here's a better way, and you start to come out of that hole. That moment for you was when you wanted to be. Now, you have several stories you've shared, Al, but one of them is the day I wanted to become an effective speaker. The low point moment was when he got up in your face and said,
Yeah.
tell your effing story. You started to do that. Didn't happen overnight, did it?
No.
When was that conversation? Well, when was that ass chewing? What do you want to call it?
Yeah, it was January of this year, right?
It was January of this year. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
So
yeah.
you now are on the upward trend, but you haven't. Speaking and storytelling is an ongoing journey. You're never going to give a presentation where you walk away saying, I'm done. That's as good as I can do. It's never going to happen. You're going to keep getting better and better. But with time, that story will have even more impact, because it's going to set you further down this path where you are having an impact and not your wife's story.
Yeah. And I love that you put it that way, because that's where I was hoping this was going to go. I mean, really, because you cannot wait for a perfect moment, because there will never be a perfect moment. You know, I say jump in with both feet. I did the same thing with the podcast. I had no clue how to interview people. I had no clue how to do a podcast. I just did it. I'm like, I'll figure it out on the way. That's how I've done everything else pretty much the majority of my life. First time doing something, right? First time working on a packaging machine, not knowing anything about a packaging machine. I'll figure it out. And to me, I think that's the best learning, right? You're getting your nose bloody at the same time, and you pick up on things a lot quicker, at least for me. If you gave me a book, Michael, and said, here, read this, and after you're done, you'll be an extraordinary speaker, I'll just give you the book back and go, yeah, no, thanks, because that doesn't work for me. I'll go in there and I'll make my mistakes. I'll trip, I'll fall, I'll stutter, but I'll get better.
You know, Al, what you just said is, if you're listening to this, take nothing else from this podcast, take that. I've studied many successful people, and I'm convinced at this point in my life that there's only one key to success, and you've got to get up the next day and do it again and again and again. The second dirtiest word in the English language after should is failure. There's no failure.
Yeah.
There is, as one of my friends put it, negative outcomes. Not what we hope, but it's a learning. It's like, okay, that way doesn't work under those circumstances. Let's go try a new way. I've studied some of the most successful people in the world, and every single one of them has made more, quote, failures. And they just kept going and they kept adjusting. That's all success is. There's no magic bullet. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and he was talking about how all these people now come into our inbox, to our text now, to our on the internet, and they're showing us this golden shortcut. It doesn't exist. If you're struggling with an addiction, or you were and you're not now, did you wake up on the second day after realizing I've got a problem and you were all better? No, it's an ongoing battle. Some days are worse than others. That's how success is. And if your story can convey that to people, that like, look, there's no magic bullet here. I just got to get up every day and work the program. And the days I don't, man, do I struggle. Business owners who have a program, if you will, I've got to do these 5 activities every day. If I don't, those are the days my business struggles. If in our relationship, if I start shooting all over my wife, man, we have problems. When I stop doing that, we're doing better. It's those repeatable habits that we keep doing, and quit labeling everything success or failure. And if you buy into that and you're willing to share your story of those struggles where some days it just didn't work, but I kept going, you're going to inspire more people than you realize.
Yeah, amen. And if you go and you look, you said you've interviewed, hundreds, if not thousands of famous people and people who have made it, right? You go and look at a lot of the famous singers, musicians, actors, actresses. You ever watch documentaries on them? My gosh, they hit more low points than they hit high points during their career, right? I mean, literally they did. The ones that didn't give up started fine-tuning each little thing, right? At least people who would give them the feedback and go, okay, this is why I didn't pick you after your audition, because now you got some feedback going, okay, now I need to work on this, right? Athletes, people don't make it to pro ball or pro whatever it is that they're going for without a ton of failures and being knocked down, without somebody teaching them, or for them even learning these experiences, right? And when you said that, I pictured NASCAR. I love watching NASCAR.
Okay.
I love people who don't understand NASCAR. I don't like watching it because all it is a bunch of cars making a left turn after left turn after left turn. There's a lot more behind it, right? There's tire pressure, there's fuel, there's aerodynamics, there's adjustments on the car, there's different places on the track. I mean, there's so many variables to make your car faster, because NASCAR's made it as fair as possible. All cars have to go through the same inspection. Everything has to be identical. It's not like it used to be back in the 70s where you could cheat a little bit, and do something to your car to make it quicker. I've seen cars that have been way back in the pack in the 20th, or in the high 30s, come up and win a race. And it's that a constant adjustment throughout the race that got the car better and better and better. And then, of course, yes, the driver's skill, knowing the track, understanding the track, understand where the car rides quicker, where it rides slower. it goes the same with what we're just talking about.
Yeah, I'm a huge part of the IndyCar series, huge
Yeah.
fan of the IndyCar series. And my partner, she's gotten all involved with it now, watching it with me. And I'm teaching her that, yes, you may be the guy with the biggest brass whatever's out
Yeah.
there, but if you drive it too hard and too fast, you wear down the tires. Right. And
Yeah.
tires are, you don't have fuel, the correct fuel consumption. So there's this constant balance. And that is a great metaphor for life. If you go all in one part, but you ignore the rest, you're going to burn out. You're going to burn your tires out too fast and they're
Yeah.
going to shred and you might have a big accident. If you don't go hard enough when you need to, you're not going to win that race. So terrific metaphor. I hadn't thought about that as a metaphor for life, but it is. But what I'm constantly working with people on, Al, is look, stop thinking this story is good or bad, right or wrong. No such thing. By the way, there's no one way to tell a story. My way has worked very well for many others. I've been trained by some of the best speakers in the world. I'm not saying you have to do it this way, but there are commonalities you should definitely consider and test out before you discard them. Working with people all the time saying, look, stop evaluating and judging yourself so harshly. Like, just because you didn't climb Mount Everest or win an Olympic gold doesn't mean people don't want to hear you. In fact, people don't want to hear those speakers. I shouldn't say that. We like to hear those speakers. They're inspiring for about 10 minutes. But until they describe their failures, their struggles, their strife, their setbacks, and help us understand how they got through those, now we care. It's no longer about winning the Olympic gold medal or climbing Everest. Is what did you do as a human being when you felt like I want to quit? Because I'm sitting here at home, I'm looking at this stack of bills and my relationship is struggling. I need to know how to not quit. That's what your audience is thinking. And that's why your story is so powerful, not grabbing the brass ring. We do want to know that you've had some success. Otherwise, if you're staying down here the whole time, we're like, well, I don't want to go that path. But we need to hear the struggle first to say, you're like me. I understand you. I get where you are. I promise you, you can get out. Here's the end result if you do that.
Yeah. Amen to that. Because, the majority of our guests that come on our show do exactly that, right? They share their darkness of their life, what put them there, and then they share the light and what got them out and how they went about doing it. And it's crazy because when I first started doing the show, after probably doing about 20 episodes, I was like, gosh, it's almost like everyone's story's the same. Am I going to be able to really keep this show going? Because people are going to hear the same repetitive stuff all the time. And then it took probably another month, maybe month and a half. And I went, oh my gosh, the journeys are different. Their journeys are completely different. So yes, this show can continue to go because everyone has that different journey. You've gone through a different journey than I have. And even though maybe we have some similarities, but our journey is still, and that's the process that we need to enjoy. I like to look at it for me doing what I'm doing, and maybe it was the same for you, Michael. Enjoy that journey, right? Because there are going to be some rocks in the road. There are going to be some potholes. Enjoy that journey because as long as you keep moving forward, you're going to get to where you want to go.
Excellent point. Tony Robbins asked a question, and that is, whenever you experience something new, ask yourself, how can I use this? Not, oh, this is so bad. This is so awful. Look, you're human. You're going to have an initial reaction. But once you get past that, ask yourself, how can I use this?
Yeah.
And you bring up a valuable point, Al, and this is important in storytelling. We all have our own journey. However, we have 6 common emotions we all share. When your story can tap into at least one of those or a combination of them, you will hook people. We each experience happiness, anger, sadness, surprise, disgust, and fear, or some form of those. Happiness, anger, sadness, surprise, disgust, and fear. When you tap into those, you have a universal theme underneath your story. And the external aspects of it no longer matter. That's the, oh, you get me. You're just like me.
Yeah.
Think about the best athletes or most accomplished people who, yeah, they talk about their success, but they also discuss, this is how I was at my low point. I was scared to death. I was so frustrated. I was angry at myself for being, we can tap into that. It's like, oh yeah. And look what you did after you learned how to get past that moment.
Amen. I love that. And that is so true, right? That is definitely so true. What else? I mean, it's hard to believe, gosh, we've almost been into this an hour. I think we're just like about 5 minutes away from an hour. So what is something else? Another just key element that, I mean, you shared the 5, but is there anything else you can share with our listeners for those, especially those of my audience here, right? That do want to start telling their story and want to start helping others. Is there anything else you could share with them that would really kind of even help them start stepping on that very first stone and moving forward?
Yep, I'm going to share my t-shirt with you. I wore this
Okay.
for a reason today. See if you can read this. Bad choices
Make good stories.
make good stories.
And that's on your website or your picture there. I saw
Mhm.
you holding your jacket like that. I love it.
Don't run from your bad choices. They're embarrassing. They can be humiliating. Now this wasn't a choice I made. Well, yeah, it was. When I was in first grade, I made a bad choice one day during indoor recess to jump up on my desk and start entertaining my friends, which was breaking a class rule. Because of my bad choice, when my teacher walked back in the room during indoor recess, she looked at me and said, well, since you love standing on your desk so much, I'm going to let you do it during nap time. 2 hours later, rain is pelting the window. You can hear it hitting the steel roof overhead. The lights are turned off in the classroom. 31 kids are resting their heads on their desks. And I'm standing on top of mine in the middle of all those kids. And how do you think I'm feeling?
Pretty crappy.
My
Tired.
my classmates are not sleeping. They're doing,
Yeah.
right. And this went on for 40 minutes, Al.
Oh, wow.
And I just wanted to disappear from the earth. And when my teacher finally looked up at me and said, you can get down now. I hope you've learned your lesson. I thought, never, ever stand in front of people again.
Yeah.
And for the next 25 years, I didn't voluntarily stand in front of any group. Notice I said voluntarily because in the ultimate irony, 25 years later, I'm a certified financial planner, and I've been given the task of going out and giving workshops to attract new clients into my firm. I was a miserable failure. I was so bad. My boss said to me, you're a lousy speaker. Your stories suck. Turn this around in the next 90 days or you're fired. The title of my next book came from his mouth that day.
It sounds like
Your
it.
stories suck.
Very suck.
And that set me on a journey that led me to be here with you today, because when I was 31 years old, I was terrified of standing in front of folks. I had a low self-esteem, and that was part of it. I mean, that had a major contribution to the way I felt about myself in front of other people. But then I went on this journey, starting with Toastmasters and ultimately the National Speakers Association, where I learned that everybody is afraid of speaking. It is a natural fear. Second, we've all had bad experiences. And like an addiction, you can manage all of that if you got the right mindset and you got the right support system in place and the right tools.
Yes.
So I went on this long journey, and ultimately I decided I'm meant to be a speaker and a trainer to help other people who've had those same experiences as me. So I retired from financial planning, started this company, and this is what I do. It took me a long time to get here, far longer than I think it needed to. And that's what I tell people, I'm sharing my journey with you so that we can shorten the learning curve and get rid of a lot of that pain that's unnecessary. So choices you've made, which at the time seemed like bad choices, can turn out to be good choices in the long run because it puts you where you need to be. But don't run from those choices. Be willing to share them. Yes, you're going to feel some humiliation, some embarrassment, but that's a universal feeling. Other people will be with you. They'll appreciate that you're open and authentic enough to say, I'm not trying to be up here, stand up in front of you and be perfect or feel like I'm better than you. Nope, I'm a human being. I've made some really bad choices. I've learned from them. Here's what I've learned. Maybe it can help you too.
I love it.
That's
Thank you for that. So before we get ready to sign up, because I know you're a very busy guy and I don't want to take up a lot of your time. What, and maybe you had just done this with this information you just shared. And if so, that's fine. If not, you have something else. What is it that you want our audience to gain from what they heard today?
Accept your imperfections, the choices you've made. Not even, I jokingly say bad choices make good stories. Don't label your choice. Hey, I did this. This was the result. Here's what I learned from it. Don't kid yourself that because you haven't done something newsworthy or because you're not a superstar in your field that people can't benefit from you. They need your story. The people who've lived the everyday experiences are the ones we need to hear from. Because remember, the reason we tell stories is twofold. Number one, to create emotion, but more importantly, to give people hope. Hope that they can get unstuck. They can get out of where they are. And if not you, then who?
Yeah. Would that be your main message as well?
Share your story. Take those 5 elements. Be willing to, as one of my friends says, rip your chest open and show us your beating heart.
Wow.
Because that's how you connect and leave an impact. And just like you experienced, Al, when you started sharing your journey and people started coming up to you and saying, wow, that connected with me. Thank you for sharing that. What they were really saying was, thank you, you've given me hope.
Gosh, I never thought of it that way. Thanks for saying that. Yeah.
You're welcome.
Because that's really the reason why I want to do the speaking, right? Is for that reason right there. Michael, in case, and I'm hope there's people out there that hear this, see this podcast, see this show. How can they find you? And I'll be sure that the links are going to be on the caption. So in case people forget, they're going to be there for you. But I also want to give you the opportunity to talk a little bit more about speaking CPR.
Yeah, if you want, I've got a complimentary resource. It's my list. Nobody else gets it. You don't have to buy it. It's called 52 Storytelling Insights. This will give you some insights into being a better storyteller. It's a weekly 5-minute audio that comes straight to your email inbox. Make sure to whitelist me so it doesn't end up in spam. But otherwise, the idea behind it, Al, is you just build one skill on top of another a week at a time, rather than here's a fire hose of ideas.
Yeah.
Because we all know how that works. But just create the habit of becoming a better storyteller. Be cognizant of that. If you have specific questions, we've got other resources and training programs. Feel free to contact me, mike@speakingcpr.com.
Okay. And will you still, if you would, please email me everything that you would like us to put on there so I can make sure.
I'll be happy to.
I do not want to miss anything. I mean, yeah, we appreciate you coming on and sharing your knowledge and sharing your skills and helping. Gosh, you just helped me so much. Again, this is what I love about doing these shows is it's a learning process for me. I get to meet some amazing individuals. I really, really do appreciate you and just appreciate your time, what you're doing. And yeah, I just want to make sure all that information's there.
Yeah, I'll give it to you.
In case someone would love to reach out to you.
Yeah, and I appreciate, first of all, the opportunity to come on and talk about stories, which is my passion in life, and helping other people find theirs. Number 2, appreciate you for telling your story and not just leaning on your wife's story. Opening up your chest and saying, this is because you're helping many more people that way. And third, as a host, you're a really good host because this was a dialogue and not a pre-scripted checklist. Oh, got that question, got that one, got that one. So if you're watching this podcast, Al's a really good host because this was a dialogue between two guys, could be sitting, I would maybe say at the bar, but not necessarily in this case, over lunch, but
Yeah,
just
well,
having a conversation. And that's what a good podcast does. So you do a nice job. I appreciate that.
thank you. Thank you so much. Greatly
you.
appreciate it. Is there anything else you'd like to share before we stop the recording here?
That's it. Embrace your story, get out there and share it and keep working it. Don't look for perfection. It's about perfection. It's about connection, not perfection. You can't have both.
And
Strive for perfection, you're not going to connect.
I love that you said that because the opposite of addiction is connection.
There
So
you go.
it looks like they're in hand in hand.
Yeah, I've got an image of a light switch. It's like you got to pick one. Can't
Yeah.
have either. You can't have both. So go for the connection.
I love it. That's a great way of putting it. Michael, again, thank you for your time. Hey guys, thank you to all our listeners, all our sponsors, all our guest co-hosts when we do have them come on the show. You guys, none of this would be possible if it wasn't for you. I mean, seriously, you guys are the ones that are making this possible. You're the one that's helping us get to 200th episode, to our 200th episode, all our likes, a lot of the great reviews that we've had from people. So again, it's not me. This is just a platform. It's all of you. And again, it's our guests and our listeners. That's what's making this a success. So again, thank you guys. I love and appreciate every single one of you. And remember this, addiction is giving up everything for one thing, and recovery is giving up one thing for everything. We're out.